All right, so we are continuing with assignment 7 in digital painting. I'm doing Barkley from Sesame Street. And so far we're doing refined painting, and I showed you how you can use internal compositing and clone stamping to kind of speed it up. But let's look at our course outline and see when this is due, which is today. But then what we're going to be doing next, know that you can always look at your course outline and know what's expected of you. So we're on November 19th. We're going to turn in our digital paintings and at least one photo reference for the digital painting by 11:59 tonight. We're also turning in our question of the day 4 that is also in Unit 14 and getting that finished up. And then I'm going to be introducing to you today your final project, which will be the project that's worth 10 points, 10% of your grade, that is graded by class critique, not by me. And we start that with the proving ground number 4, which will be due next class, which is how we come up with our idea for our final project. So I'm excited to get into that. But assignment 7, we're trying to get fully introduced to the discipline of digital painting. I'm going to skip to it by going to assignments, scrolling down, finding assignment 7, and where you post it. And you'll see lots and lots of resources here. So this was one by digital honors students about digital pain and painting and their process of first kind of sketching, finding photo reference, even some AI versions to help with stylistic choices, doing the base color, customizing the brush, finding a color palette from different inspirations, and then putting it all together into their final painting. And then playing with the final finish. So remember, you can always go to the assignments page and look at some of these supplemental slideshows to help with your understanding of the discipline, especially if you're getting stuck. Digital painting is incredibly popular for concept art, just like compositing is. So what I've posted so far, scroll all the way down here, is my photo reference. That's the first requirement, and then some of the inspiration, and then we set it up. I have my assignment 7 folder, and you can experiment and build this any way you like, but this is my PSD file, and to me there are 3 things required in a digital painting. 3 layers that matter. The first is a blank white layer. And then what's the next layer? So make a blank white, make sure it's locked. The next is what I call base color. A lot of people call base color. The entire shape of your subject, whether it's a portrait, whether it's an animal, should be filled in with 100% opaque pixels that you choose. And unlike digital coloring or flatting, they do not need to be behind an outline, right? They can just be base color. And then the third thing you need is refined paint on top of that. And the refined paint is not at 100%. The refined paint, you're painting at about a 60% opacity. So here you can see what the refined paint layer looks like on its own with that white background. If I turn the white background off, you'll see the empty space. And that's because that's where the base color comes through. And those 2 things give you this pretty satisfying surface texture that is a lot more like paint, right? Whether it's watercolor, whether it's like colored pencil, whether it's like oil paint, or if I used a softer edge brush, more like airbrush. So those are the 3 things I'll be looking for when you turn in your painting. And if all parts of it are quote unquote finished, as long as you have refined, customized brushwork at a lower opacity on top of base color over some part of your painting that feels finished, then I think you have fully been exposed to digital painting, which is the reason for this project. So a lot of us have our base color layer and we're finishing that up. Once that's finished, what's the next step? Whether you use sketching to get there or not, the next step is to build your own brush. So I'm going to show you that. And for the refined color, I like to, it's optional, but I like to make a new background that is middle gray. And that helps you see, just like with flat coloring or with digital coloring, helps you see the lights and the darks. So how do we make our own brush? So if you have not made your own brush yet, and so that's Darius, that's Pablo, that's Jaden. Jerry, have you made your own brush? Okay, great. Was there anyone else that needs to make their brush? So the three of you. So Pablo, I need your ears for this. I'm going to help you step by step make a brush. Okay? So you're going to go to File in Photoshop, and you're going to say New. And we're going to make a new brush, and we're going to name it Karl Brush, and then some description. So I'm going to call this my fur texture brush. And then on the size, I'm going to make it in pixels. So you need to be aware of this window. Usually we do inches. We usually do 8 by 10 by 350. We are designing a tool here. Brushes cannot be more than 3,500 pixels. So we're going to define this by pixels, and we're going to make it 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. For those of you already made your brush, you are on your refined painting, just keep going because it takes a long time. Okay, now you're going to choose the brush tool, right? You have your tablet, and you're going to set the colors to be the default colors. So black on white. And to do that, so let's say you have a different color setup going on. Like right now I have red on black, right? You click on this little icon here that's above the foreground and background color. That's the default foreground and background. Shortcut for it is D, but that will be the pure black on pure white. Because you want your brush, when you're designing a brush, you want it to be a dark ink color. Now this is what a brush looks like. It has a wooden handle, it's got a metal collar, and then it's got hairs that stick together, right? That's what a brush looks like. If you were to stamp this brush onto an ink pad, just like you would use for making a fingerprint at a police station, and then you were to lift that brush off and then stamp it down onto a piece of paper, what happens to the tip of that brush? Well, this is what's called a pinstriping brush. It's round and it's long. And this is made for like elegant, long, thin lines, which is very similar to the brush I'm using right now. That's like a pinstriping brush. But the mark it would make on the piece of paper would look like a small circle like this. It would be pretty light because not all of those hairs are pressing against the paper, just the tips of them are, right? So if I wanted this to be my brush, to look like this, this is what I could do. I make those marks in like a little circle. And then I make them big on this 1,000 by 1,000 pixel image. And then maybe I'll add just a few more marks to it. A few kind of stray hairs to it. But this would be a round brush. And it would make sense it would be a little bit heavier in the middle than it would at the side. So it's very much like a thumbprint or a fingerprint. And I know digital artists that actually just scan in their fingerprint and use that as a brush. It's kind of a clever way of proving that it's their own artwork. Okay, now, how do we turn it into a brush? Well, what if I wanted to erase something? Well, I can just take the lasso and I can just trim it with delete, right? So that's my brush. This is all you have to do. Edit, define brush preset. That will save it as a brush. And it will be named the same name as your file. So this is Karl Brush Fur Texture Brush. A little repetitive, but there we go. And now I have it as a brush. So what do? I stamp it. And sure enough, it gives me that image. But if I click and drag like you do with a brush, it's going to look really artificial. You see this little swirl here at the top? See how it's always locked at the exact same angle? Is that how a paintbrush really works? No, it has a lot more variation to it each time. So I'm going to delete all this, and I'm going to show you how you then customize your brush. And that's the requirement. It's great to make your own brush, but you can customize any kind of brush. And we do that going to Window and Brush Settings. So that'll be the next step. But for the three of you who are creating your brush, I'm going to come around and help you make one. All right, so I have this brush, but I don't want it to paint like this, where it's all locked. So I need to open up Brush Settings. If you ever lose Brush Settings, this is how you can find them. They go to Window, click on Brush Settings. They say F5 is the shortcut for it. You can try that if it works on your keyboard. What I like is for it to live in this sidebar here. So it has a little brush with little settings above it. So that can be turned on and off. Now, there are only 2 brush settings I recommend you use. You can play with others, but I want you to really understand them before you use them. The ones that are absolutely essential is the very top one. So this is just like layer styles. You're going to put a check next to that box, and you're going to highlight it to change what are called the shape dynamics of the brush. Right now, this is what your brush is doing. Bless you. So what we don't like about this in terms of a believable paint texture is that the brush is always the exact same size and it's always locked at the exact same angle. So what we want to do is first play with the size jitter. So when I use it, it's not always the exact same size. So what does that look like? It looks like this. You still see the loops all at the same angle, but you see how they're different sizes now? That's because each time the brush goes down, it varies that size because I have that size jitter. Okay, next, we want the control of the brush to be controlled by pin pressure. So we can go thick to thin based on how hard we press. So now, it's like that. It can go really thin. It can go really thick. Next, the minimum diameter. I just up that a tiny bit just so you don't get like tiny little pixel size strokes. So you're always painting with at least some clarity, just like with a brush. That is the minimum diameter setting. And then angle jitter, this to me is the magic one. Because what makes the brush look artificial is that it's always locked at the same angle. As soon as you set angle jitter, especially on a round brush, then you'll see that it looks truly random. Its edges are never the same. It's never just the same repetition. And that's good for fur, for sure. For sure. All right. And then roundness jitter. Roundness jitter is interesting. It softens the edges and brings things more to the core. That's a subtle thing, but I think it's useful. And that's all on shape dynamics. And you can see how that changes your brush. The next thing I use is even if you have great shape dynamics, you see if I use a lot of this brush, I only get textures at the edges. So that's a very heavy brush. So to lighten it up, to bring the texture of the surface of the painting out, instead of just obliterating it with solid pixels, I go to the texture option. It's the third one down. Click on it to open the texture abilities. And Darius, you can teach this to Pablo when he gets back. And that will help reinforce it for you. The texture we want to use, which works really well for a paper texture or for a canvas texture, is under the water setting. And it's the third option for water. The default one, for some reason, is like these. It's the first one for trees. It's like these really big leaves. Really not